All right. I hope everyone can hear me. My name is Shane Hannafy with the Redbud chapter, and I wanted to thank everyone for coming to our presentation today. I'm going to give a bit of an introduction into the chapter and then introduce our speaker for today. So the Redbud chapter champions the native plants of Nevada and Placer counties in California. And we invite you to visit our website where we offer many resources, including those on gardening. We have plant lists, conservation information, and you can also access our newsletter and our calendar of events. We also have several social media platforms, which we invite you to follow and to reach out to us. We are on Instagram. We have a Facebook page. We also invite you to join our Facebook group, which offers you the chance to ask identification questions or gardening questions with a focus on the Sierra foothills in the North Nevada and Placer counties. And then we also have a YouTube channel where you can see recordings of our past presentations. This one will be up there later on today. And we also have some workshops and virtual hikes, and we've been taking advantage of having the YouTube channel and offering virtual programs in a time where we are sort of limited in the amount of in-person events we can have. I also want to mention that we do have some vacancies in our chapter, and we invite anyone to send us an email or a message on social media to inquire about more information. You can also find out descriptions of these vacancies on our website. And so we are looking for a chapter treasurer. We're looking for a programs chair who will plan and help put on programs like the one we're having today. We're looking for a volunteer coordinator, a field trip chair, which would kick in when we're allowed to do in-person events again, and also an ethnobotany chair. And so if any of those sound interesting, we don't require any particular expertise, just a passion to get involved with the chapter. And any other skills or knowledge you'd like to offer us, don't hesitate to reach out. And lastly, I'd like to mention that we are going to be having a holiday sale starting on Tuesday next week, which will run for 3 days, where we will be offering books and bulbs, native plant seeds, t-shirts, posters for all of your holiday gift buying needs. So follow us on social media for more information about that. And so now I'd like to introduce this afternoon's speaker. We at the Redbud chapter are just so thrilled to welcome Hannah Kang. She will be introducing us to the vital role herbaria play and our scientific understanding of our native plants, both in California and the world at large. Hannah has attained an impressive amount of botanical accomplishment in her young career. She currently works as a botanist for an environmental consultation firm here in California. She is also our chapter education chair in charge of our scholarships and grants and other educational materials produced by Redbud. Previously, she served as the CMPS State Student Advisor, and most appropriately to the context of today's presentation, she worked as the curatorial assistant at the UC Davis Herbarium. Hannah is also a prolific contributor to CalPhoto and CalPhotos, which features over 2,000 of her gorgeous plant photos for all of our enjoyment. You may also have seen her on social media administrating the Endangered Plants of California Facebook group, posting interesting educational content on her Instagram and on Facebook, and just absolutely nailing plant ID inquiries in the CMPS forum. And so with that, I'd like you all to join me in welcoming Hannah Kang. Hannah?
Hi, Shane. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, so I know that I gave this presentation before in person, and so this is through Zoom, and I'm going to try my best to make it as interactive as possible. So if I ask a question, if you can put your response in the chat, I have my iPad here so I can see everyone's responses. I want to make sure I'm engaging with all of you guys. Okay, so here we go. I first want to say thank you to Ellen. I don't know if she's in this Zoom lecture, but Ellen is one of the best people I know. She taught me basically everything that I know about herbarium work. She taught me how to make labels. She taught me how to database. She taught me so much about plant taxonomy. I just can't thank Ellen enough. She's one of my favorite people. And I just want to say that everything in this presentation, basically Ellen taught me. So thank you, Ellen. So what is a herbarium? I'm asking you guys, put it in the chat. What do you think a herbarium is? I want to hear your guys' responses. Hi, Ellen. She says she thinks a herbarium is dead plants. I see dead plant museum, plant records, plant collections. Teresa says collection of dried and labeled plants. I love all of your guys' responses. So when I used to do like mini tours at the herbarium, we would always say that our herbarium is like a library of plants, because you know libraries are filled with knowledge and so much important information, and that is exactly true for a herbarium, because a herbarium houses so much data. And I don't know about you guys, but I love data. And so the best way I think to describe a herbarium is to call it a library of plants. So a lot of my information is going to come from the UC Davis Center for Plant Diversity, and that's only because I worked and volunteered there for a while. So most of the information may pertain to Davis. However, it's important to note that different herbaria do it differently. For instance, you can see here in the collections room, it's quite cold. If anyone has been to the UC Davis Herbarium, you know it's cold. And it's cold because of where we live. You know, there are these things called herbarium beetles, and they love to eat herbarium specimens. So we keep that room cold in order to deter insect activity, and usually that works. Other herbaria probably use like boric acid and other forms of chemical treatments to deter insects. But at the Davis Herbarium, the cold room really is efficient. And you can see here, the Davis Herbarium is oh so special. And it's kind of unique because other herbaria don't always have like a set place for you to look at specimens and, you know, do your work, or it's sometimes really small. You only have a really small area, but the Davis Herbarium has a really nice plant ID section. So I know that herbarium specimens are typically perceived as being on sheets, which you can see here. And for the most part, that's true, but it's also true that herbarium specimens can be cones, they could be seeds, they could be just skin of certain plants, you know? So I think that the idea that, oh, herbarium specimens are just herbarium sheets, that's not always true. You know, like Rancho, well now I think they're called California Botanic Garden. They have a huge seed collection, which is not really part of their herbarium per se, because it's in a different area on their campus. But seeds, fruits, herbaria also store all of that. And so herbaria has been around for a really, really long time. And before Carl Linnaeus came around, a lot of places would have books, just like the one shown here, where the people would just press their plants and keep them in books. But Carl Linnaeus, you know, the father of taxonomy, and he's pretty, you know, he revolutionized a lot of things. He came up with the idea to have free sheets. And that is really like, it really made herbaria have more space and be more efficient, because whereas when you have these books of specimens, it's kind of hard to organize. So when Linnaeus was like, oh, we should have free sheets, that really changed the game. And this picture right here, this is called Entibie. And, there's always debate on what's the oldest herbarium specimen and, all of that. But a lot of historians believe that this is the oldest herbarium book or specimen, and it's, probably from 1558. So that's quite a while. So California, we all love California native plants, right? And California is such a biodiversity hotspot, and herbaria really plays an important role in preserving this biodiversity. And so many botanists are enamored with California's flora. Jepson, Alice Eastwood, really any botanist you can name, they've been to California to see our iconic flora. And here we have Leia Munzii, one of the tidy tips. And so if anyone has ever been to Carrizo Plains, you'll know that you can see this in mass fields, but this isn't a really common plant. This is a rare plant. It's endemic to California, meaning it's exclusive and can only be found in California. And the range of this plant is not super large. And so you're probably like, okay, how does herbaria play a role in this? So in Kern County, there's this place called the Lost Hills Airport. And this beautiful tidy tips once occurred there. And you can see here, this is from CCH, California Consortium. And it was last collected in 1987. And so ever since 1987, this tidy tips has not been seen within this Lost Hills vicinity. It still occurs in Kern County, but not at this occurrence. And we know this because there's a herbarium record. It's different when you just see field notes or you hear it from another botanist. When you have a herbarium specimen, it's like living proof. You can't really deny it. So herbaria, they also preserve extinct plants. And this is probably my favorite extinct plant. This is Monardella leucocephala. This is one of the coyote mints. And so Mr. Beecher Crampton, who was a grass and Navaricia expert, collected this beautiful specimen. And you can see here, he even noted that it was not common back in 1941. And this plant has not been seen since the 1940s. But how do we know that? Oh, wow. How did Monardella leucocephala even exist? It's because we have a herbarium specimen of it. It really shows that, oh, yes, this coyote mint did occur here in Merced County. And look at Crampton's specimen. One is that I-73. So it's also a reference to, you're like, oh, wait, what is that? Does that species really exist? You can always refer back to herbarium specimens. And there have been occurrences where extinct plants resurface. And that's exactly what happened for Eriogonum truncatum, the Mount Diablo buckwheat. So this buckwheat was presumed to be extinct. However, botanists Heath Bartosh and Brian Peterson, they rediscovered a new population that had millions and millions of Mount Diablo buckwheats. And so if you're in Heath's or Brian's footsteps, you're like, oh my gosh, I think I just rediscovered this buckwheat that was once extinct. You're like, how can I really confirm that this is truly the Mount Diablo buckwheat? Well, you go to a herbarium and then you say, oh, E.L. Green collected this Mount Diablo buckwheat just a few miles from where I was. And you compare all the characteristics. And you're like, wow, everything looks really good. And so herbarium specimens can give you more confidence in a plant determination, especially for extinct plants. And I know that this talk is being hosted by CNPS, which advocates for native plants. However, it's very important to be up to date with non-native and invasive plants because they do play a crucial ecological role in California's flora. And so you can see here, this is yellow star thistle. Yellow star thistle has been around for quite some time, since 1870s. I just found this specimen because it was imaged. It's from 1881. It might have not been as prolific and really nasty back in 1881, but this herbarium specimen shows us, oh, wow, yellow star thistle has been around. And here's another one, alligator weed, which it's, I think it was recently listed on the Invasive Plant Council, but it's pretty bad. I know that it's a huge issue up in Northern California in the wetlands and lakes. And we know, since there's a herbarium specimen, it has been around since 1965. So I really like this quote that Terry said. She is the collections manager. She said, "What makes pressed plants beautiful is they preserve stories from snapshots in time. A well-preserved and mounted specimen is also a work of art. If well-preserved, a plant specimen can last hundreds of years." And that is absolutely true. Here we have a specimen of Calochorus monanthus, and this is a Calochorus species that is believed to be extinct. And we have a herbarium record of it, and it will hopefully last for hundreds more years. So, you know, a lot of herbarium's work revolves around plant taxonomy, rare, endangered, invasive plants. But most of the time, when I show you a herbarium specimen, the collector or the botanist who collected that isn't the one that made that specimen. So it's a whole process. You really have to read through a dead person's notes to understand where they've been and what their thought processes are. And so most of the time, like I saw this, where in the hell was this collected? Well, man, that's what I'm always thinking whenever I'll be making dead people's labels, because it's like, I can't talk to them because they're no longer around. But, you know, it's important to recognize that with herbarium work, most of the time the curation takes like a huge chunk of time, and that's going through the field notes, making sure that this species is, you know, somewhat correctly identified, making sure it's not a weird outlier for a range extension that probably doesn't exist, and it takes a long time. Okay, so I grew up in Roseville, California. I don't know if anyone knows where that is. Usually when I say Sacramento, people are like, oh, I know where that is. So Roseville has been going through a lot of changes, and you can see here through this Google Earth video how much change is really happening right now. And so, you know, it's just the way it is. You know, our population is growing, and we can't always save everything, which is pretty unfortunate, but that's the reality of life. And I don't know if you can see here, but if you go back in the beginning of the video, this is all vernal pool habitat, vernal pool complexes. You can see some swales later on, but at the end of the video, you see not as much habitat. Whoa. It's more developed. And so you're probably thinking, okay, what does that have to do with herbarium specimens? Well, herbarium specimens help us gain an understanding of this historical change. And so Ellen, she helped me ID and make these labels for my Roseville vernal plant collections. And so every little dot you see here are all my collections. And, you know, I wish I could go back 50 years and collect everything that was once there, but I wasn't alive. But I really think that one way we can preserve natural history is by collecting plants and making a record of it. Because as you can see from that video, things just change so fast. And so I put this slide here to show, you know, when you're collecting plants, you're really collecting history. And this is one of my really good friends, Thea and I, collecting an aphyllon species. We were super happy. This is Ellen, Dan Potter, Jen, other botanists for our Antone Meadow Flora. You know, collecting plants. Ellen works so hard. Here are some pressed plants. This is Jepson's notebook, which, you know, someone from Berkeley was analyzing and trying to make their best labels from. You know, that whole curation process is pretty difficult. And so Jepson, he was very prolific, one of California's like pioneer botanists. And we have so much data about California's flora because of Jepson and his herbarium specimens. So anyone here like CalFlora? iNaturalist? Seek? I know that those apps are pretty popular and I love CalFlora. And we had Cynthia present her CalFlora Zoom lecture, and I just think that CalFlora is so amazing. You know, iNaturalist, you can just sometimes take a picture of a plant and it will tell you what it thinks it is, or possibly like the genus at least. But even with like all this technology, sometimes it's not enough. And so here I am, I'm taking a picture of this skyrocket or Ipomopsis. And I love taking photos of plants. I'm such a photo taker. I take too many photos of plants. I know. But really, photos can't give you the whole picture. Maybe if you're Steve Mattson or Kier, because they take like amazingly detailed photos. But 9 times out of 10, a photo is not good enough. You can't really go through a lot of characteristics or the key through a photo. And that's where herbarium specimens are really important. Because here's the same plant. This is Ipomopsis, the one I was taking a picture of. So the difference between having that photo or having that through iNaturalist or CalFlora is that it's living on a sheet. And so it has location information, which is very important. It has DNA, and there's this little pocket here that usually mounters put bits of pieces of the specimen for DNA analysis if any researcher wants to come and use it. And like I said, it's gone through that curatorial process, double checking that the location and all of that is okay and that it's not a mis-ID. And so having a herbarium specimen always triumphs photos, CalFlora, and iNaturalist observation, because you have the specimen there and you can confirm its determination. And so let's say Dr. Dieter Wilken, who is a Ipomopsis pulmonaceae expert, came to the Davis Herbarium and he saw this specimen. And he was like, oh my gosh, Hannah Kang did not correctly ID this specimen. I'm going to put my annotation label and make it the right annotation, meaning that I mis-ID'd this specimen and an expert is telling me, oh, it should be classified as this species. And so having that annotation label is so important, because then it's kind of confirming its determination, and it's also saying like, hey, you know, I know you thought it was this species, but in actuality, I'm the expert and I think it's this. And that really helps researchers and consultants like myself who could go into Herbaria to look at specimens to confirm IDs.
Hannah, this is the moderator, and I know you had mentioned earlier that you're open to questions throughout your presentation. Am I right about that?
Yes.
Okay. So here's a question. Sometimes the taxonomy changes and plant names change. When that happens, what happens to the naming of plants in the herbarium? That seems to go with these annotation labels, and I wondered if you wanted to comment on that here.
Excellent question to whoever asked that. So let's take the example of a mimulus. So that got split into Diplocus and Erythranthe. So thousands of herbarium specimens have mimulus still on their label. And it takes people like Ellen, Jennifer Poor, people like what I used to do. We have to go through each specimen and go through the literature, whoever the expert did, their paper, carefully analyze it and see what characteristics make it this species, and then put a new annotation label saying, oh, this is actually Diplocus torii, or this should be Erythranthe guttata instead of Mimulus guttatus. And so you'll often see that annotation label. I don't know if you can see my cursor. Hopefully it'll be on top here or sometimes here. Does that answer your question?
That was great. Thanks, Hannah.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions?
Not right now, other than someone who's so sad that the Mimulus name has been updated. So now, of course, they have to go back and learn all over again.
Well, I understand why name changes can cause some frustration, but name changes show progress, you know? And so it actually gives us an understanding for plant evolution. So with herbarium specimens, we can get DNA, and DNA is super powerful. And so I know that a lot of people might be unhappy about the recent, you know, Mimulus name change. Some people may be unhappy about the used to be Orbanki, now it's Aphyllon. But it's powerful information because it tells us, wow, maybe we weren't so right about these genera being closely related to each other. Now we have a better understanding of their relationship.
Stephen asked an interesting related question. Are the sheets, when there's a new name, are the sheets moved to a new place in the herbarium?
Another great question, Stephen. You are right. So actually at the UC Davis Herbarium, Ellen, Jennifer, Terry, and I, we spent, I don't know, almost a year moving the collections to make space for new folders. And so when a name change or a family change happens like that, we have to move everything accordingly. And at the UC Davis Herbarium, it's organized in a way that things that are most closely related to each other are together. So it's a huge process. And just to put in a little plug, if any of you guys are feeling generous, please donate to your local herbaria. They are so underfunded, and it's becoming kind of like a dying art. I hate to say that, but you know, you can imagine the whole annotations, the moving the collections, that is a huge effort. Thank you for your question, Stephen. Any other questions?
Yes, there is a question. Photograph. This goes back to your commentary about photographs. Photographs preserve what the plants look like when they were fresh, and at different times in their life cycle. Do you combine photographs with the herbarium specimen?
Absolutely. Oh man, I think Ellen is in the chat. But there was this one collector at Davis who would always put his beautiful photographs along with his specimen. And I know that Ellen has done that before too. So having both photos and a specimen is wonderful. Any other questions?
I think you're free to move on.
Thank you. So yeah, herbarium specimens and plant collecting, it kind of seems old-fashioned and kind of outdated, but these type of old-fashioned things are really hard to beat. You can see here Avon Nelson in Yellowstone, and this is taken in 1899. I know a lot of people are like, oh, you young millennials, you Zoomer, or Gen Zers or whatever. But I don't think anyone in this Zoom lecture is from 1899. That's a long time ago. And you know what? 1899, it's 2020. We're still doing the same thing, and herbarium specimens are still working. Does anyone in here know what a county record is? If you know what a county record is, please put it in the chat. Oh, Ellen said that Albert Grigerk always put his photos with his specimen, and that's true. Anyone know what a county record is? Deborah says, first time found in that county. Deborah, you're absolutely right. So does anyone think that they would know why that's important? Why county records are important? I'll leave that for you guys to think about, because county records are often range extensions, meaning that it's expanding the geological range of a plant, native or non-native. And so here I have this quote, "A record without a voucher is only a rumor," by the famous Peter Raven. Anyone else heard of that? It's a pretty popular quote, but it's very true. And it's popular for a good reason. So here I took these photographs of Hastingia alba, also known as white bog Hastingia. Has anyone here been to like Northern California, like Trinity County, Siskiyou County, past Redding? You've seen this species along with Darlingtonia. They often are together. But I didn't take this photo in Northern California. I took this photo in Placer County right here. And this is a county record. So you can see even just from the CalPhoto distribution map that it is way more common in Northern California. And where I found it, it wasn't like the same habitat as it normally is, like with the Darlingtonia and other species. But having this county record is important because it tells us, oh, Hastingia really does occur here. And you know what? There's a herbarium specimen of it. If someone ever doubted me, like, oh, Hannah King didn't see that there, she's lying. Well, no, it's like I have a herbarium specimen. Come check it out at Davis if you don't believe me. So I think the second southern occurrence, this is a legit record too. That's a herbarium specimen all the way down in SoCal. Does anyone know what floras are? You could put that in the chat. Ellen Dean has done a lot of floras. She's done so many important floras throughout her career. This is her right here. Toby says it's a survey of plant records in a certain area. Deborah says it's a list of taxa from a given area. So Deborah, a list of taxa, that's more of a checklist, not necessarily a flora. And Toby says it's a survey of plant records, which is both of those answers are partly correct, but a flora typically implies that you are actually vouchering specimens, meaning you're collecting specimens for a herbarium. So here, this is one of the many floras that Ellen has done, and she graciously allowed me to help her. This is an Antone Meadow. Anyone here like Lake Tahoe, the Sierra Nevada? I am a huge Sierra Nevada girl. Like, I will be there for days. That's my favorite place ever. I love the Sierra. So this Antone Meadow is like 7 miles northwest from Tahoe City, if anyone knows where that is. And it's this beautiful area. And we spent like the whole summer last year in 2019 collecting and documenting all the plants there. And we found over, 500 specimens. It was pretty amazing. And one of our most interesting finds was Cascade Lake Ceanothus. So this is a hybrid. It's a hybrid between Ceanothus prostratus and, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, sorry, I had a little technical glitch. This is a hybrid. And so at first when Ellen and I, we came across it, we were like, what? And then we were with Leah Gardner, who's from State Parks. We're like, oh my gosh, it looks so different. We knew it looked different, but we didn't know exactly what it was. And so we made some nice collections. And so later on, when Ellen she is an expert on California flora. She truly is. She remembers things from keys. She remembers details. And so when she says that she doesn't know a plant, or if she's not confident in her determination, that really says a lot. So she was like, this Ceanothus just isn't right. And so she sent it to Dr. Dieter Wilken, who is a Ceanothus expert. And he was like, oh, it's this hybrid. And he gave us his annotation label, you can see here, even though that's in Ellen's handwriting. I can tell it, that's her handwriting. And he told us like, oh, it's this hybrid. Even though it's not listed as rare, this is the second time that it's been documented. There's only 2 occurrences of this Ceanothus hybrid. So doing floras and collecting plants is so important, and it's, like I said, becoming less and less common, which is a little unfortunate. Here is another flora that Ellen did that she let me assist her on. And who was it? Mitchell, he already did a flora of Emerald Bay. It was like decades ago. And so before you do a flora, you always want to know what plants grow where, and any rare plants you want to be on the lookout for. You do these literature searches. And so anyone who's been to the Sierra Nevada or high elevation, you have most likely come across this Calochortus lechleinii, or smoky Mariposa lily. And this is a very common Calochortus. It's not rare by any means. You can see its distribution here on CalFlora. Not a rare plant. And Emerald Bay is in South Lake Tahoe, like somewhere around here. And so Ellen, I think she worked on this flora for 3 years. She was collecting for 3 years, and she didn't find Calochortus lechleinii, but we know that this Calochortus did occur at Emerald Bay because there are records of it. And Jonas Thomas Howell collected this exact Calochortus in 1925, and we can verify that because there was a herbarium specimen. Ellen believes that because of like foot traffic and other types of disturbances, that might be a reason why this Mariposa lily doesn't occur at Emerald Bay. So I know that Deborah earlier said, oh, a flora is a list of plants from a certain region. And that's not entirely incorrect. That's more of what I would say a checklist is. And so here's a checklist. You know, that's kind of like when I do floristic surveys for work, I'm not collecting plants. I'm making like a huge list of all the plants that I see. I'm not collecting anything. That's a checklist. Whereas like a flora, you're collecting every single plant that you see. Like you'll come back and your car has like 230 bags of plants. So there's that difference. And if anyone knows Shane has been working really hard on compiling what grows in Placer, Nevada County. And so this year, this spring and summer, we made a lot of collecting efforts to try and document plants that were just on checklists or just, you know, kind of anecdotal. There's no herbarium specimens. And that has really been a fun adventure, but it's not only fun, but it's also really important because it's preserving the natural history. Who knows, in 50 years, those plants may not be there. Okay, so I know, I bet a lot of people don't like the name changes or anything like that. But whenever there's a new species that, you know, you have to have a herbarium specimen associated with it, or it's generally more well accepted. And so I helped Ellen with her Lisianthes research. She is a Lisianthes expert. This is a beautiful vine to shrub to, it's complicated. Lisianthes is complicated. In the Solanaceae family. So, you know, that's like eggplants, potatoes. And she has spent her whole career working on this, and she's described a lot of new species. And whenever you describe a new species, you often want to like have a type specimen with that species. You know, not everyone follows that. Some people just, you know, do scans way back then, or they just write it down in their field notes. But it's more like having a type specimen associated with your newly described species is more accepted. And so with a type specimen, what that conveys is that this type specimen has the characteristics, like the key characteristics, everything that display this new species. And so if you think that, oh man, like I think I discovered a new species, you go through herbarium specimens to see if it matches what you have. If not, then you need to delegate a type specimen. And I have an example of just that. So this is Juncus digitatus, or finger rush. And you can see here, this is just Juncus spa. So it's just Juncus spa. And that's what in herbarium world, we would call that, oh, that's gonna go in the indent file. And the indent file, meaning that's like where the specimens that have a genus, but not to a specific epithet, meaning not a full species, that's where these go. Like just Carrick spa, that would go in the indent file. And so this was originally just as Juncus spa, and this was collected by Dr. Dean Taylor. And he's a very good botanist. He's also a very prolific collector. And so he's like, oh man, I just collected this Juncus and I don't know what it is. Like, ooh, you know, maybe some of you might be thinking like, oh, you shouldn't just leave it as Juncus spa. Like, come on, get it to a species, key it out, which I kind of understand, but sometimes the key just doesn't work for you, or just it's not matching right. And so he left it as Juncus spa. And years go by, da 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 da, and then Peter Zika, who is a Carex and Juncus expert, he comes across the specimen, and he's with Carol with him, and they're like, "Oh, this is a new species." So since Dean was like, "Oh wait, this is like I don't know what Juncus this is, like I'm just gonna leave it as Juncus spa," but then an expert comes along and annotates it and says it's a new species. It's Juncus digitatus. And this is a paratype. Remember how I was talking about type specimens? So paratypes, it's not like a holotype, which is meaning like the actual original specimen. You don't need to worry too much about like what types are what, but yeah, this is one of the types. And so here is the actual full specimen. This is taken from my iPhone, so it's not the best quality. And so we, was it last year? Jen and I, she is the assistant curator at the UC Davis Herbarium. I think she still works there. We went to near Pollock Pines because Dean heard from Shelley and Stephen Perry, who are from the El Dorado chapter, and they're lovely people. They are so great. They were like, "Oh, I think we found Juncus digitatus, and it's going to be an El Dorado County record." Remember, county records are important. So Dean came all the way from Santa Cruz to see this Juncus with his own eyes and be like, "Is it really Juncus digitatus?" And indeed it was. And we confirmed its existence in this lava cap by making and creating a herbarium record. Has anyone here been to Jepson Prairie? I love Jepson Prairie. It's such a beautiful vernal pool community. And so if you go there later on in like the late summer, you might come across this rare grass, Tuctoria mucronata. And before, like, I think it was the 1970s, Tuctoria was at Jepson Prairie. And we know that because Beecher Crampton collected Tuctoria at Jepson Prairie. He made many sheets, many herbarium specimens. So we know of its existence at Jepson Prairie, but throughout time, the population dwindled and now it's not there anymore. And so Carol Witham, who is a wonderful vernal pool expert, she actually collected Tuctoria seeds from herbarium specimens. She did that in combination with collecting seeds from, I believe, a Yolo County occurrence of Tuctoria. But the fact that she got seeds, viable seeds from a herbarium specimen, just really shows how important preserving these plants are. And so, you know, we all know climate change is real. It's real. And our plants are one of the first indicators of change. And so herbarium specimens are really useful in showing different changes. So when you see a herbarium label, you can see like the date, you know, when it was flowering and all of that. Here, I think you can, I'll go back. You can see all this valuable data. And so California, the consortium of California Herbaria, they are making a huge effort to image all specimens from certain families. And that is huge because we'll have specimens from the 1930s to now, and you can really see the changes in blooming periods. You can see when plants first begin to sprout, or, you know, all those notes that are embedded in the label. It'll be accessible and online, which is what I just went over. This label here, you can see, oh, Ellen Dean collected this on the 5th of July in 2019 near the Tahoe Basin. And so who knows, in 100 years, this Corydalis may not be in the Tahoe Basin anymore. You never know, but we have a record of this specimen. And this data is irreplaceable. It's so priceless. And so, you know, I work as a field botanist and I absolutely love field work. I wouldn't be a field botanist if I didn't like field work, but I really enjoy herbarium work, and I really hope that other botanists try to incorporate herbaria into their work. I know that there are some that are really prolific and out there, but not everyone. So if there are any botanists out there, if you think like, oh man, I think I know of a county record, or oh, I think I found this non-native plant that hasn't been recorded, like please contact your local herbaria and try and, you know, make it into a specimen and help that herbarium grow. And here we go. So we are getting so much data about rare and endangered plants. This is from Dean's and Aaron's poster from NorCal Botany Symposium. We have so much data about rare plants. You know, we have CNDDB, we have CalPhoto, we have iNaturalist, so much data, but we don't have as many herbarium specimens. We're losing DNA, you know? So even though that all this online data is accessible, we're not seeing the same trend for herbarium specimens, which is very important. Okay, this is the poll and quiz, and I think that Shane is going to start this. Okay, so it's just 3 quick questions. You know, everyone, you can just click on which answer you think is correct. Is the poll working for you guys? I'll leave the poll up for another minute. So for number 2, you think you discovered a new population of an extinct plant. What do you do? I see some folks said look on CalFlora and CalPhotos, which I can understand why that would be your choice. But remember, you can't always see all the important details through photos. And so it's important that you actually go to a herbarium and you look side by side for those characteristics. Okay, I'm gonna end the poll in 5 seconds. All right. Oh, there we go. Good job, everyone. Okay. So now I'll take questions from the moderators. If you have any questions, please leave them in the chat.
Here's a good question. Do you need permits to collect specimens?
Yes, you do. Not everyone uses permits. I guess it just depends on your personality. You should have a permit though. There are so many different kinds. Like, let's say you're on private property, you would need a CDFW permit. If you're on Forest Service land, you would need a Forest Service collecting permit. If you are on BLM land, you don't really necessarily need a permit. but having a plant permit is really, it kind of makes you more official, but I know that not all professional botanists use permits, so I don't want to say it as an end all be all.
Okay, okay. If people wonder whether they need permits, how should they go about making sure that they're doing the right thing?
Okay, so I think that question is kind of asking like, where can you get a permit? Is that?
It's kind of like, how do you find out whether or not you need a permit?
Oh,
It's like, do you know?
okay. I'll just give an example. Like if you're out in the park and you see a plant that you really want to collect, well, it's probably like the city property. And so you would, this is really complicated because I try to do this. You would have to go through the city to ask for permission. That's what I did. I tried to do when I collected the vernal pool plants of Roseville. But it's a process. So you have to look at the land ownership. Is it private? Is it public? BLM, Forest Service? That's so if it's private, you would need a CDFW permit.
Okay.
And Herbaria legally cannot accept state and federally listed plants without a permit.
Okay.
I believe
that's
that's true. Ellen can correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay. What about if if what you want to collect is on private property, do you then need the CDFW permit, or do you just need permission from the property owner? How do you, is that?
So it really varies because for work, I'm like 99% of the time on private I do have a CDFW permit, but if like, let's say the property owner is like, oh no, you're okay, you can collect plants on my property. To me, that's like, oh, I have the green light because the property owner is telling me it's okay. So if you can contact the property owner, that's usually best.
Okay. And then should you get something in writing from the property owner?
No,
I mean, in order to get through the herbarium okay process.
Oh, you mean like, let's say you have you collected a plant and you want to give it to a herbarium?
That's
right. Depending on who is making that specimen or whatever, maybe they'll the herbarium will contact you and say, hey, we see that this collection was collected in this private property. Is it okay if we share these location details, or do you want us to hide it? It really just, it's situational.
Okay. So here's a related question that Sue asks. Do you need witnesses in addition to the collector?
Witnesses, that sounds like a jury duty or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you're with other people when you're collecting, not everyone does this, but like here you can see Ellen Dean. She was with Jennifer Poor. She was with me. She was with Dan Potter. She was with, what is it, Chris Thompson? I think it's Chris Thompson. Roberta Jerson, Terry Berry. So you can list the additional collectors on here.
Okay.
You can see Dean did that here. Dean was like, oh, I was with Hannah Kang. I was with Jennifer Poor. But not everyone does that. It's really up to the collector.
Okay. So you don't need them, but if you have them, it's nice to list them.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay. When you are, when you have the herbarium sheet, and there are those colored boxes off to the left, they kind of look like they might be for making sure that when people take a picture of it, they know what the true colors are. But I'm just guessing Shane wants to know, what are those colored boxes on the herbarium sheets used for?
Oh, let me go to one to, you mean these colored boxes?
That's right.
Yeah, so it's like a reference color palette.
Mm-hmm.
So like for me, when I look at this looks like a green. But oh, look, there's a green there. It does look similar. So having this little color bar here is really just to like have it as a reference, if that answers your question.
It does. I bet it does. So when you are doing a DNA sequence for a specimen, can you use DNA when you use for a variety of specimens then to determine the direction of movement of species?
So do you mean when direction of movement of species?
As they migrate, say, because of climate change or something else.
Oh, yeah. So like, well, there's so many papers on it, but researchers target specific loci, and they can do it through like geographical, like phenological analyses. So there are, in my last lecture, I did put some publications, but researchers do use herbarium specimens, and then they make the data so that they can pull where the location, like which locations of which specimens are closely related, if that makes sense. I know that's kind of complicated, but there's a lot of literature with that. And so whoever asked that question, if you want any papers or references, I'll be happy to email them to you.
Okay. But the general answer is that the DNA can be one of the tools that's used when people are looking at this kind of question?
Yes. So
Okay.
actually researchers, they like, when they sequence it from herbarium specimens, they can actually pull like which, even though it's the same species, they can show like, oh, well, the plants from Sacramento County and Placer County aren't really that closely related. Like, it's pretty crazy what DNA can do.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. You know, we're coming back to that question again of how to do collections. People are really intrigued by this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so there are a couple of questions here. One of them, I think, goes back to the original question, you know, hiking trails, do you need permits from the city or somebody else? It still applies. It's whoever's land it is. If it's the city's land or if it's a state park, you need a permit from whatever entity owns the land, correct?
Correct. So let's use Antone Meadow as an example. So Ellen contacted California State Parks, and she worked directly with California State Parks to see with the whole permitting process. I think for Antone Meadow, they didn't give her a permit. Ellen, correct me if I'm wrong, because they said that they think it would be a problem. For Emerald Bay, she did have a permit. So like I'm really trying to document all the vernal pool plants in Roseville. I try to get a permit through the city of Roseville. It was very difficult. So I don't have a permit, but I still collect on open spaces and things like that because that's what I'm passionate about. And, you know, there's no like plant police out there who's gonna stop me and be like, you can't collect that plant. So yeah, so if you're just like, let's say you're hiking at the Tahoe Rim Trail and you want to start collecting plants, I say like you can collect plants for your own herbarium, your own personal herbarium. But if you do want to give your specimens to a actual like California Consortium verified herbarium, I think it's best if you do have a permit, because there could be questions like, hey, why did Sam collect this plant on this property? That's not acceptable. So if you are planning on collecting plants, I think you should get a permit, like professionally and seriously. You should, like, whether if you know you're on Forest Service land, California State Parks, private land, please do get a permit. But again, not everyone does this. Like John Thomas Howell, super great collector. Did he have a permit? No. Dean Taylor, great collector. Does he have a permit? No. So I think it's about personality.
Okay. So here's I think the final question on this subject, and And that is kind of what I think for most of us would be an edge case, but maybe not so much for you. What if the plant you find is the only one of that species in the area, or if it's endangered?
If it's the only plant there, like just a single, one
Instance,
single
yeah.
plant, don't collect it. That's unethical. Take a picture, have your GPS unit document it, but if that's the only single individual there, please do not collect it.
Okay, and if it's endangered, what do you all do professionally when you find a plant that you think is rare or endangered, but there it is, you found it?
So even personal and work related, I would gather as much information as I could, take very detailed photos. I don't want to collect it if it's the only one there. That's just not ethical. I would take notes like, oh, how is it flowering, the condition of the plant, get a lot of information, and then you submit this data to CNDDB or CDFW, which is, if any people know, it's called like BIOS, rare plant find. And so they get that data from professional and non-professional botanists, and they put it on BIOS. So that's what I recommend doing, that is getting good data, good photos, and sending it to CDFW.
Okay, that's terrific. So Stephen had a question. It was, has anyone ever faked an herbarium sheet?
Has anyone ever
Faked an herbarium sheet? Ah.
Yeah. You know,
Okay.
it's hard when because your herbarium specimens can get all not organized, and you might say, oh, I actually collected this plant here, when in reality you didn't.
Right.
Accidents happen, and like there are certain collector, I'm trying to say this in the most polite way, there are certain collectors that don't always double check their determinations. And
Yes.
so they'll say that they found like a counting record that's like 8 counties away from its normal habitat and range.
Mm-hmm.
So that happens for sure.
Okay, so yes. And then how, if Stacy is concerned about unethical collectors and whether you might have any suggestions on how to deal with them. She knows of an instance where someone collected a presumed extinct species, and what is the responsibility of the individual when they become aware of someone who is collecting in a way that is not responsible? What do you recommend?
Contact CDFW.
Okay.
Like I don't know if anyone was aware with the whole Dudleya poaching situation, that like it's serious. You need to contact the lead agencies, because that's not okay.
Okay. And Stephen has a really good suggestion, and that is, if you are going to collect for herbaria, he says a friend of his requires a minimum number of plants to be in a location before he will collect a plant for an herbarium. And that kind of makes sense. You've kind of set up for yourself.
Yes.
A guideline.
I like that.
It's, can anybody submit specimens to Herbaria, or do you need some kind of credentials or membership or what?
No, you don't need any credentials or membership. Anyone is welcome to go to our herbarium and say, hi, I have these specimens for you. Anyone is welcome to do that. It's hard because there's something called backlog. And so if you bring in a specimen, it's probably going to go into backlog because 50 other people might have done the same thing. So I suggest, if you do have a certain specimen you really want to make valid through the California Consortium of Herbaria, is you go to the herbarium and you say, hi, I have this specimen of X, Y, and Z. What can I do to help you through the process? What can I do to help you with the curatorial process? And often herbaria have a fee associated with each specimen or something. I know I've seen like with imaging through the whole California CCH2 project, I think they say that the estimated cost for each image to image each one is like $7 or something like that. So I always try to donate money to the Davis Herbarium. So I would suggest saying like, hey, what can I do to help make this process go easier for you? If that makes sense.
Right. So donate not only the specimen, but maybe a little money to make the process that supports the donation of the specimen also work.
Absolutely, because remember from my slide, like we basically like curate dead people's specimens, and we often don't know where the hell it was collected. We spend so much time looking and looking. And so even if you just volunteer your own time to learn how to database, how to make labels, because it took me a while. It sounds easy, but it's not.
For anyone who is interested in the permit requirements, Ellen has included in the chat some really good specific information about what different public entities require in terms of permits. So this would be really good information to take a look at.
Thank you so much, Ellen. I appreciate you. And I see that Alejandro had a hand up.
Okay, Alejandro, you want to type your question in? And if you could type your question into the chat, that would be great. We'll see if we can do that. Let's see. Oh, he said by mistake. Sorry. Okay. Somebody said, do you have to make sure there are no insects hiding in the specimens before you press them? What about fungi?
That is a great point, and I kind of skimmed over that. So whenever you have a herbarium specimen, you here I have some right here. So these are some of my plants that I collected. And so when you first collect a plant, it's like this, and you just have your specimen here. But when you bring it to herbarium, you don't just bring it in the open space. You put this in the freezer. And the reason why you put it in the freezer is because of insects. And so you leave it in there for maybe 7 or 10 days. And then after that, then you can bring it into like the normal sphere of the herbarium, key it out and all of that. But you would be so surprised to see how many insects are in plants. So many.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, there was a really lovely question here, and that is, what does it take to get a job working in an herbarium?
So that is a great question. I actually did an article for CNPS that goes over a little bit of the career opportunities in herbarium. I can send that to whoever is interested. Please put your email in the chat. So that's the thing. Herbaria is like a dying art. Ellen has she was formerly the curator. She had my dream job, which is being a curator. So if you want to be a curator, and curator means different things at different herbaria, but at larger institutions, you need a PhD. So meaning that like you have to have your bachelor's and then go through a PhD program. And so those jobs are so rare. Herbarium curator jobs are really rare, but there are so many opportunities like what I had at being a herbarium curatorial assistant. Like I saw the is it Santa Barbara Botanical Garden just posted one. If anyone's interested, leave your email in the chat. I can find it for you. There are a lot of assistant type of jobs for herbarium out there. So just be on the lookout. And there's a website and a society called, is it Curators of Herbarium? Or Society of Herbarium Curators, where they post a lot of job postings too.
That's great. That's terrific. And thanks for being so, offering to be so helpful to other people who want to get into this field.
Absolutely.
Terrific.
Of course.
Yeah. And it's interesting how you have combined the herbarium work with the field work.
I think that's crucial.
Mm-hmm.
I think it really, I use my vacation days to go to the herbarium.
I bet you used to do it the other way around, right?
Yeah. I'm going there next week, apparently.
Okay. Okay. So Raylene asks a question that I think you've kind of covered in general, but maybe there's a good way to get this, and that's what kind of information do you need to include with an herbarium specimen? Sounds like Raylene is kind of interested in maybe doing a little work and then submitting some specimens.
So that's a great point, Raylan. The UC Davis Herbarium actually has a really helpful information sheet, which I will link to you, Raylan. But basically you want the GPS coordinates, the location information, and that's not just GPS, that's meaning what county you're in, which highway you're near, which are you at a cul-de-sac near, whatever. Like location information like that is really important because some researcher from Brazil can come and be like, I don't know where the hell Lake Tahoe is. So being specific is very important on a label. You also want to make sure that you get the determination correct, that, you know, because you can kind of get away with not having an absolutely correct ID on CalFlora, iNaturalist, Instagram, on Facebook. But with a herbarium specimen, it's a little different because you have professional experts who have spent their whole careers studying these families, studying these plants, coming into herbaria and looking at your specimen. And, you know, you really want to make sure that you're doing that plant justice. Like, you know, Ellen, she's a Lisianthus expert. She's been all over the world looking at Lisianthus specimens. And so just having a good specimen, good location information, and the best ID you can give is so helpful.
How do you know if you are one of us, not one of you, and you know, you don't know what's already in an herbarium? Like you say, okay, well, here's the species that I like and I pay attention to when I go out on hikes and I have on my property, you know, something like that. And you say, well, but does the herbarium near me, or that, you know, kind of covers where I live, does that herbarium have, does it have enough specimens of this species? What would make a specimen worthwhile of a species that is not rare?
So that's another great question. So you can go on cch1.org or cch2.org and type in the species and see which herbaria have that plant and the number.
Is it CCH then the numeral 1.org?
Yes.
Okay.
And like the Davis Herbarium, it has about 350,000 specimens, but space is getting a little tight there. I mean, they're not completely out of room, but like UC Berkeley's Herbarium, they have 3 million specimens, and it's tight. Their space is tight.
So what's the difference between CCH1 and CCH2? Is it just how much they've got?
No, so CCH1 does not have images. Like you can click on a record and it might show you an image and take you to another portal. But CCH2, that's the project that I mentioned earlier, the imaging the specimens, this.
I don't think I have the email address right. So it's just cch1. Is it .org or .edu? Either way, I'm not finding it. I'm trying to put the right URL in the chat for people.
They can just probably Google CCH1 or CCH2 here, and it should be like the first link on Google.
It is. Oh, okay, it's under Jepson. Okay. Okay. Yep. Okay. Yep. I'll do that. Put that in. Thank you. Great. Oh, Raylyn says, could you talk about how you lay out your plants and what materials you use? That's a great question.
Do you mean when I press them, or?
I think so.
Oh, yeah. So I actually sent my video clips to CMPS, and I think they'll be making a video, but basically you need, for a plant press, you want newspaper, blotter paper, and cardboard. So there's this really dangerous website called Herbarium Supply, and you could spend hundreds of dollars on there, which I definitely have. So you can get your materials from there, and that is what California Herbaria use. So it's a professional, like, herbarium grade equipment. And so you just need your cardboard. You can cut them. You can cut your own cardboard from boxes. I've done that. And then blotter paper, which you can get that at the art store. You can get it on Herbarium Supply, and then newspaper or anything. But I like to make it into a sandwich. So you have your cardboard, and then you have your blotter paper. Depending on how thick your specimen is, I usually just use one blotter paper. But then if it's really thick, I'll use 2 or 3. And then your specimen goes in the middle, another cardboard, and you repeat. Does that answer your question?
After you put the second piece of cardboard on, then what do you do?
After I put the second piece of cardboard, then I repeat the process. So then I'm going to put my other piece of blotter paper, and then I'm going to put my specimen, another piece of blotter paper, and then my cardboard.
So you're kind of, you're lining, you're getting a whole bunch up. And then how do you do the pressing?
I wish I had press, but so you just have a plant press. Here, let me get mine. I have 2, but this is so, like, you know, can you guys see me okay, or?
Mm-hmm.
So you remember that whole sandwich ordeal I told you about? So you would have it in here. You just want to push your press super tight, like really, really tight, and then just strap it super, super securely. But you don't need a press. Like, I know before I had a press, I would just like use something really hard and solid and just push it together and use like straps to make it secure. Like, you don't absolutely need a plant press, but it helps.
Okay. So you're doing there in that press, what can I say, large quantities of specimens at one time.
Yeah.
In order to keep up with that carload of specimens that you brought back from your last field experience.
You should have seen the ones that Ellen and I collected. It was so much. It's nothing compared to what we did for Antone Meadow. Yeah.
Oh, so Shane has a really good suggestion here, saying he uses plywood and rope to sandwich his cardboard and newspaper layers.
Because I know if you go on the Herbarium Supply, like, I think the presses there are like $100, which is a lot in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, I was. Let's see here. I think we're getting there. Oh, is there a value to the aesthetics of how you array what you put on that herbarium specimen page?
I think there is, but people are different. Like, when you just look at this Corydalis specimen, it's so beautiful. And so it takes a lot of thought into making a good sheet. So for instance, when I first just kind of started collecting, I would just grab everything. But then I thought like, oh, when I'm collecting, if there's fruits nearby, I want to get the fruits. If this plant looks better, I'll get this one. And you can see here, like, we didn't only just collect the flowers, we collected one long leaf too, because if anyone has ever seen Corydalis, it's big. It's like 2.5 feet tall. So you can't get the whole specimen. You can't have a 2.5 feet, plant on a herbarium sheet.
I also like here on this sample, speaking of aesthetics, the curve that you have to the vegetative example.
So I believe Lynn, if anyone knows Charlie Russell, his wife Lynn is a phenomenal mounter. She mounts a lot of UC Davis's specimens, and she really has the eye for making things really nice. So I mounted this Juncus specimen here, but Lynn could have, if she mounted this, she might have done it totally different and make it totally spazzy. Like, she really has a gift for being able to make the specimen really pop like how she did here. So that's another thing with herbarium work. You have to understand that when you collect the plant, that's not where it ends, You have to make your label, you have to mount it, you have to freeze it. It's a really long process.
And it sounds like somebody asked about using glycerin to conserve the colors, and Ellen, your mentor, said advises not to treat with anything to preserve the colors because the colors might fade with time, and just acknowledges that some specimens do fade more than others.
Thank you for that, Ellen.
So Raylyn asks, how do you keep records of your collections?
Like you said, Ellen is my mentor. She is my botany mom. I do exactly what Ellen does, and she has a notebook. And so I keep everything in my notebook. So can you guys see my notebook? I put the location information, my collector number, the species, all of that. So I like to do it in a notebook. I also have it online as a Google Doc, but people are different. People do it differently. I think it's really important though to stay organized. Like Ellen, she has like, I don't know, 11,000 specimens. Like imagine trying to keep track of 11,000 specimens. Like John Thomas Howell, he had probably like 50,000 specimens. Same with Alice Eastwood. Dean Taylor has, I don't know, 25,000 specimens. That's, so having a notebook or anything to try and keep track of all your notes is so important. Because like, remember that slide that said, where the hell was this collected? You want to know.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. And I can see that the advantage of starting with the system and then keeping that system. So you don't have to transfer things over after you've been doing it for a year, 2 years, 5 years.
Yes, yes.
Well, are there any other questions? I think did I miss any questions? I'm just doing a little review here. Raylan just wanted to know what kind of tape you use when you're working with the herbarium specimen?
I thought I had some in here, but it's acid-free herbarium tape. You can get it on the herbarium supply website.
Of course
But-
you can.
Yeah, but it's acid-free and it's expensive. It's really important, like for herbarium sheets, because they could last hundreds of years. You
Mhm.
want everything to be acid-free, archival ink. It adds up.
Okay. Okay. If you do donate your, I'm asking, well, never mind. I won't, because I would put you in a wrong position. Okay.
No, it's okay.
Okay, right. Okay, so this is if you say you invest in these materials and then you donate your specimens to the nonprofit herbarium at UC Davis,
Mhm.
and you deduct these materials as an expense related to a volunteer, as a volunteer or as a
can.
donation to a nonprofit. I mean, something one should ask one's
But
tax
Davis
preparer,
is
don't
not
you
a
think?
nonprofit. The UC Davis Herbarium is not a nonprofit. If
Okay.
you do it for CNPS, I know you can do that as like a tax write-off, but
Okay.
Davis is not a nonprofit.
Okay. Okay. Well, something for people to look into if they, Ellen says
Oh,
the
the
herbarium is a
herbarium
nonprofit.
nonprofit. Okay, I'm sorry, I misspoke. So
Okay.
you probably could ask your
Tax preparer.
tax.
Yeah, the person who would have to go to the IRS with you if the answer was wrong and anyone asked you about
Well,
it.
I imagine you could do it because I know that you can do it for CNPS related expenses.
Right. And as Ellen said, we provide donation letters. So, if you wanted, when you want to donate to the herbarium, they'll give you a letter that says you donated to a nonprofit, and you could share that with your tax preparer. Okay, and Grace has a question that I think is probably for Ellen. So there are native Lisianthus species. I'm sure Hannah knows the answer too.
Yeah, there is native, but there's one Lisianthus what is it, Ellen? The one that's planted everywhere. It's cultivated, but we don't really have them. It's Lisianthus ranges like in Mexico, Panama. Ellen is just finishing up some publications, but they're not native to California.
Okay, okay. But you've learned all about them now, Hannah. Okay, and somebody wanted to know, now that we're back at this slide, I can ask this question. This photograph of this gorgeous, gorgeous meadow or vernal pool, where was this taken?
First, I have to ask Ellen if I'm allowed to share. Ellen, am I allowed to share where this photo was taken? I was with Ellen, and it's kind of a private place. So I'm going to wait for her response because this is private property.
Maybe some general response. You were with me. I have no idea.
So I'll give you, it was in Napa County's Snell Valley.
Which valley?
Snell.
Can you spell that, please?
I think it's Snell, but you can't really access it because it's gated. So
okay,
you would have to contact the property owner.
Okay. Just gorgeous. No wonder you used.
Yeah, it was like unreal last year.
Wow. Oh, there. Okay. Okay. You pinged Ellen's brain. Okay. So Emily asks, what determines if a plant is native to an area? And I suspect that what she's getting at is, so I see a plant that has sprung up in my yard. And I'm going, oh my gosh, I didn't know that this plant was native. How do I determine whether this plant is, a local native, or it's native to, or it sprung up here because, the seed came from my neighbors and it wasn't local there either. what does this local native label mean to you in your professional experience?
So I think like if you can usually tell if it's like a weed, like let's say Caltrans, they like to do like their native seed mix, like what is it, the desert Phacelia, baby blue eyes. Like if you see like a desert Phacelia where I'm at in Roseville, it's native, but it's from Caltrans' seed mix, you know. But in terms of like what classifies something as native and non-native, there's like this
native to an area.
European
Native to an area, like a local
native.
native. Local native.
Yeah, so like I don't know, like for instance, like I see like that desert Phacelia over here because of Caltrans. It's not native to this area. It's been planted. You could go on CalFlora and look at the distribution and see if it's close to you. And the type of setting it is it in like a rudurals disturbed habitat? Is it are you seeing this in a landscaped area, you know, in your backyard? What are the odds that it's, you know, that's its native habitat? Ask yourself questions like that.
Mm-hmm. So John says, I have some old herbarium samples from the 1920s and 1930s at the small ag department herbarium, Ventura County. Is there any special use for these old, somewhat messed up samples?
Messed up. I wouldn't say they're messed up, John, but you're in Ventura County. What I would contact maybe California Botanic Garden or the UCLA Herbarium and see what you can do with those specimens, because if they're like really in pristine good condition, hey, they're from the 1920s. That's important historical data. So I would definitely contact like a local herbarium close to you, John.
I think that's really a terrific answer. And for anybody who has not been to the California Botanical Garden, which was formerly Santa Ana Botanical Garden, when you travel down to Claremont in Southern California or anywhere near there, Pasadena, whatever, make a point of going there. It's exquisite.
Agree.
Oh, and I guess there must be, for those of us who don't know, ag department herbarium samples from other ag departments, because Ellen has remarked that they've incorporated ag department herbarium samples from Yolo County into the UC Davis Herbarium.
Oh, nice.
So there is a precedent.
Ellen knows
John.
a lot more than I do. She started doing herbarium work, I think, when she was an undergrad in New York. So, and I think Ellen just turned 61, right, Ellen? And so she has like 40 plus years of herbarium experience. So anything she says is like, you know, she knows.
She knows.
She knows.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Fortunate you to have her as your mentor.
Yeah, she's great.
Okay, so I think that we've just about wound up the questions. And Hannah, I'm going to put you on the spot here and just, oh, there you go. Perfect. I didn't have to put you on the spot because you've done you read my mind. So if people think of questions later, they can contact Hannah right there.
Yes, you can.
Turn it back to you, Hannah.
Yeah, thank you all so much for joining my herbarium talk. I know that it was supposed to be in person, but Zoom is our best alternative, and I really appreciate everyone that attended. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, and tell your friends and family who weren't privileged to be here with us and with Hannah today that they can watch her talk very shortly up on our Redbud Chapter CNPS YouTube channel. And if you didn't catch the link, just put Redbud Chapter CNPS into search on YouTube and you'll find it. Or you'll find our channel and you can explore this and other talks, and also some wonderful virtual field trips that Shane has prepared. Our YouTube channel is getting to be a complete marvel. Thank you, Shane, who is also the tech person behind these recordings and getting them uploaded. And another way to find the recording is to go to our Redbud website, our new Redbud website, and that is at, I'll put the link for that for our website as a whole into the chat. And you can then go to events and look at past events, and you will see the link to this past event. And you will see then from there, you'll be able to get a link to our recording of Hannah's talk. And you see that for all the other talks and all the other events that we have had since going online to Zoom and YouTube. Thank you so much, Shane. And thanks, everybody. It's been wonderful, Hannah. You've been terrific. Bye, all.